Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. We know your New York Giants are moving on with Joe Schoen staying as GM, Brian Daboll staying as head coach for their fourth seasons. We know, and John Mara knows that that's not an incredibly popular decision with a lot of the fan base. And here to help me discuss the Giants' decision and everything about what's gone on with the team in the last couple of years is the great New York Post sports columnist Steve Serby. Steve, how are you?
Ed, my pleasure. I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
And you've seen this. You've seen this mess. You've seen this drill a few times. With coaches coming and going, and good seasons and bad seasons. And I guess the place to start is: were you at all surprised by the ultimate decision, that the Giants made here to stay with Shane and Daboll?
Well, given John Mara's recent history of impatience, uh, I was earlier in the season, I would have been surprised had he not fired them both. And then as the season neared its end, I began thinking more that he was going to stay the course because he did not want upheaval. And he has had nothing but upheaval, changing coaches every 2 years. Brian Daboll is the first coach since Tom Coughlin to get more than 2 years. And I didn't think that Joe Shane was going anywhere because the Giants, the only GM they fired after as little as few as 4 years is Dave Gettleman. So I think that Shane, I thought that he was going to stay, and if Shane was going to stay, you just don't force a new head coach on Shane when Shane has a lot of respect and admiration for Brian Daboll, 3-14 aside. But it would have been, again, putting a head coach and a GM on different timelines. John Mara has tried that before. It didn't work with Gettleman and Joe Judge. It didn't work with Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo. And there's no reason to believe it would work with Joe Shane and someone who did not share his vision. So uh, I think that Shane's 2024 draft was a key for him to stay. And once that John Mara decided he was going to keep his GM, and I think he decided that uh, fairly early in the season, once he saw Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy and some of the other rookies in that draft class, once he saw that and the progress they began making and the impact they began making, uh, I think that saved Shane. And by saving Shane, that saved Brian Dable.
It's just, it's hard to say, well, the best reason for keeping, these two guys is continuity. There has to be some proof of concept that they can both do this job. And obviously going from 9 wins to 6-3 is not exactly proof of concept, but I think, John pointed to the 2024 draft. He pointed to Daboll winning coach of the year in 2022. Um, Do you
It,
just
look,
your feeling on whether, quote unquote continuity is a good enough reason?
no, it's not a good enough reason. And again, Giant fans who wanted to merit a clean house, it's hard to argue just looking at the record. But look, remember George Young when George Young first started? His first year was terrible. He had a 26-46-1 record after 5 years.
That's what I was
Uh,
gonna say. His it was 6 years into his tenure before they became the George Young Giants that people want to romanticize.
and they became the George Young Giants because he drafted Phil Simms in 1979 and Lawrence Taylor in 1981. Um, but again, 26, 46, and 1 after 5 years. One playoff win under Ray Perkins. He could have easily, John Wellington Mara could have fired George Young, and George Young never would have been a Hall of Famer. Then there's Bill Walsh, 2-14 his first year, 6-10 his second year. Then there's Chuck Noll, 1-13, 5-9, 6-8. Walsh and Noll became Hall of Famers. Now, nobody's saying that Brian Daboll's going to become a Hall of Famer, but Bill Belichick in Cleveland, 6-10, 7-9, 7-9. Look, everybody wants a pound of flesh nowadays. Everybody wants immediate gratification, and staying the course has never been John Mara's strong suit. And if you believe in the coach, which John Mara still does, maybe not as much as he did in 2022, certainly not as much as he did in 2022, and you believe in the GM he's aligned with and the philosophy of the two of them and the vision of the two of them together, that it makes more sense to take a step back to take a step forward rather than the other way around. It seems that the Giants have been taking too many steps backward and not enough steps forward. But John Mara sees light at the end of the tunnel, right or wrong. That's the way he decided to go. And I can't argue with that because you've got to either get rid of them both or keep them both, because what guarantees are there that a hot new commodity head coach can work with Joe Schoen and will be better suited than Brian Daboll to develop the young quarterback that they're going to have to draft?
Well, it's interesting, Steve, because one of the arguments that I made in this whole situation is, obviously could make an argument either way for fire both or keep both. One of the arguments that I made is, Bill Belichick is in North Carolina and might not have been the right answer anyway. Mike Vrabel, who might be the top proven head coach in this cycle, has all sorts of options, and at this point is probably headed to New England if he's not headed to the Jets or wherever. But you're almost certainly not getting Mike Vrabel. So then you're sitting with the unproven first time head coaches. 3 years ago, Brian Daboll was Ben Johnson. All right, he was Ben Johnson. He was Aaron Glenn. He was that young up and coming head coach that everybody wanted. Um, 3 years ago, Joe Schoen was the assistant GM at the top of everybody's wish list that had openings for GM. So it doesn't always work. Starting over, rebuilding your organization from scratch, means means more patience required, more years, more rebuild, and I, there's no guarantee you could have found anybody better than what you have.
Absolutely not.
Right.
And look, for both Schoen and Daboll, Schoen was a rookie GM when he was hired. Brian Daboll, even with his vast NFL resume, was a rookie head coach. And admittedly, they both made more than their share of mistakes, no question. But as Joe Schoen said on Black Monday, and this is Black Tuesday here in Queens. But anyway, but as Shane said Monday, he's admitted that he's made mistakes and he's learned from those mistakes. And Brian Daboll, of course, has made mistakes. But Shane, Daboll could argue that Joe Schoen hasn't given him a good enough roster. And Shane could argue that, well, Brian Daboll was unable to get the most out of Daniel Jones after he did in 2022. And John Mara could hold Joe Schoen responsible for letting Saquon Barkley out of the building, for letting Leonard, well, that was a good move. getting a second round pick for Leonard Williams, not paying Xavier McKinney, not paying Julian Love, and letting a lot of leadership out of that locker room, starting with Saquon. But to Mara's credit, he didn't penalize Shane as much as Mara wanted Saquon Barkley to stay, as many sleepless nights as John Mara has had this year and will have on Sunday when Saquon makes his Eagles playoff debut. He he saw enough in Joe Shane, enough in the team that Joe Shane has built in the front office to still believe in him, and with the necessity of finding a quarterback of the future, uh, why not stay with Brian Daboll to develop a young quarterback? And everybody talks about, well, Josh Allen's having a better year without Brian Daboll, but you go ask Josh Allen what Daboll meant to him, and that might change a few opinions on Brian Daboll's offensive guruship.
Yeah, there's still a lot of love for Daboll from everybody around Buffalo that I talk to. There's a lot of love for Daboll, and there are people who in Buffalo who I know would have welcomed Daboll back with open arms as offensive coordinator if he had gotten fired by the Giants and Joe Brady, the current coordinator, was to get a head coaching job. So
Look,
you know,
there's never, I've seen it over the years. There's never any guarantees that a first year head coach who is coveted by everyone, who is the hot commodity, can make it work. I
right,
mean, I remember covering the Jets way back when Joe Walton was revered as an offensive coordinator. And Joe Walton was awful as a head coach. And he lasted 7 years, which was too many. The players did not respect him, did not like him. And you can go on and on and on. Matt Eberflus, Gerard Mayo with the Patriots. I mean, I could reel off 300 first-time
right.
head coaches who were hot commodities who didn't pan out. You know, it's different when you're the vice president versus when you're on the hot seat as the president. And look, they'll be on the hot seat next year, both Shane and Daboll, especially Daboll. But uh, Daboll has shown that he can weather these storms. This was a historic 100-year storm for Daboll. 3-14, he survived it. He never wavered, and the players appreciated the fact that he never wavered. He was the same guy every day, and he better make it work. And they better find a quarterback, a bridge quarterback, and if they are convicted on one of these class of 2025 quarterbacks, they should draft one, be it the first round or second round, and let Daboll develop him,
You
because
know,
that is the way out of this dark hole.
you've got to find. I mean, Steve, I've looked at it. The Giants went 3-14 this year, and a lot of circumstances. All right, and they were never going to be great. You know, with injury circumstances and still some roster shortcomings. But I think you can argue that had Daniel Jones, while he was still starting, the Giants were 2-8. I
Right.
when you know when they moved on. I think you can argue that, or what were they, 2-8, whatever. But I think you can argue that there's at least four more games that they win with this year, which makes them a 7-win team, which still isn't great. But if they're a 7-win team, we probably never even talk about Brian Daboll's job status. If
Yeah.
all you have, you get good quarterback play in the fourth quarter of some of these games, and things look a lot different.
The alarming game to me, and the game in Germany
Hmm.
when Daniel Jones could not pull the trigger on. He had Malik Neighbors and Wandale Robinson wide open downfield.
Hmm.
That
The
was
flea flicker
very
play.
alarming.
Mhm.
And, look, Daniel Jones, nobody wants to come down hard on Daniel Jones. And there are so many other holes on the Giants um, that you don't want to blame the entire mess on Daniel Jones failing to return to form following his injuries, etc. But there's no question in my mind that better play, a better Daniel Jones would not have led the Giants to a 2-8 start. And how many times did we hear Malik Neighbors said, I was open?
Right.
Daniel Jones, and again, I liked and respected Daniel. I hope he bounces back the way Sam Darnold has this year. Um, he's in a good spot now with Kevin O'Connell. Um,
Mhm.
but Daniel Jones held the team back. He held this offense back and loved his leadership, loved his dedication, his commitment, loved him as a guy. Didn't say much, but his teammates respected him. He fulfilled the obligation of the franchise quarterback. But again, it was never realistic for anyone to think that he would be the next Eli Manning.
Right.
And with a better quarterback, with a better quarterback suited uh, for Brian Daboll and his offense, Malik Neighbors will have he'll be hard pressed to have 109 catches again, but uh, maybe you'll see more yak plays from him and Wandale Robinson um, because Daniel Jones, whether we like it or not, whether his supporters like it or not, or whether those who tear down the Giants for all the many other holes, Daniel Jones was a big problem in 2024. And again, um, better quarterback play will win them a couple or few of those games that they lost.
Absolutely. For me, the only other thing I'll say about Jones, you summed it up really well. To me, the only thing Daniel Jones ever really did wrong in New York was simply not be good enough. And that's, there's nothing else bad that I have to say about the guy. But Steve,
Yeah, look,
let me
you either have a championship quarterback or you don't. You either have a winning quarterback or you don't. Daniel Jones was a winning quarterback in 2022, aided by Saquon Barkley, but
Mhm.
he was not. And I can't blame the Giants back then for extending him or giving him that contract. Everybody blames Schoen and Daboll for giving him that contract. But if you remember at that time, he appeared to be an ascending quarterback, an
Mhm.
ascending young quarterback, but uh, they were proven wrong. He did
Right.
not ascend. And you can blame Daboll, you can blame Schoen, and you can blame Daniel Jones for not ascending. But I think I think a number Joe Schoen was not the only GM who would have made that move. However, and he did hedge his bet after 2 years, of course. Uh, but that hedging his bet tells you that he didn't fully believe in Daniel Jones, even at
Mhm.
the top of Daniel Jones' career. But obviously, the mistake was letting Saquon out of the building. And again, in Joe Shane's defense, he believes in building a team through a player like Brian Burns, and Joe Shane had to upgrade the offensive line, and he needed the resources to do both. And he does not believe in giving big ticket contracts to running backs and safeties. And that's why Xavier McKinney and Julian Love are gone. But Joe Shane failed to recognize, failed to factor in the intangibles that Saquon Barkley brought. And sometimes there are exceptions to the rule of not paying a running back, let's say. Uh, you don't, his mistake was devaluing Saquon Barkley, not only as a running back, but Saquon Barkley was a weapon and the most popular Giant and a leader in that locker room. And that's where Joe Shane missed it. Um,
And
he did not factor in all of what else Saquon Barkley brought to the table as a weapon more than a running back and as a charismatic, popular leader.
Yeah, and you hope, as we talk about a guy learning on the job and learning from mistakes, you do hope that is one thing that Joe learns from, because I've said in the past, all of these moves that we talk about, Saquon, Julian Love, McKinney, Leonard Williams, all of these veterans that are no longer there. If you look at them each in a vacuum, in a silo, just each move you can defend, but the cumulative effect of all of that was the personality and the leadership and the culture that left the team. And you hope that Joe learns that they're not just chess pieces, they're people, and people who have effect on other people. And as you said, sometimes there has to be an exception to your positional value philosophy based on the people that you're dealing with, and what they mean to everybody else. So hopefully he learns from that.
Yeah. Now, Dave, what do you think they're going to do with the number 3 pick? What's your opinion?
Oh, we got to get to that. What do I think they're going to do with the number 3 pick? I I'm so conflicted on that, because I think we need to talk about quarterback. Obviously, I think
You're not gonna say wait for Arch Manning, are you?
no,
Okay.
no, because all the commenters on my website would say wait for Arch Manning, and you might wait until 2028 for Arch Manning, because he's got a couple of years of eligibility left.
A couple of
And
years of it, couple of years of NIL. He imagine what
yes,
he's making NIL wise or
oh
will
yeah,
make.
must be nice. And besides which, there's no guarantee you can get that guy 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. But let me ask you.
You cleaned up on NIL in college, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why it took, 35, 40 more years for these players to get NIL, Steve, because I took all the money.
Yeah. Well,
Way
you
back way
deserve
back in the 80s, I took all the money.
and you deserved every cent.
Absolutely. That's why I still do this. Um, you know, Steve, I'm conflicted about the number 3 pick, and here's why. Obviously, if Cam Ward is sitting there at 3, everybody knows the Giants need a quarterback, and I'm a little concerned about a lot of the other issues, the Dion factor, and uh, and things with Shadur Sanders. But I mean, if Cam Ward is sitting there, I think you might have to take that swing. But here's my problem, and here's the whole thing that I looked at with this whole Shane and Daboll situation, is you have to do what's best for the young quarterback that you're going to be trying to bring in. And John said it better not take too long to turn this thing around.
Yeah, you know
And
what?
and
John John
are you,
always John always says that.
but but if he's going to stick to that, which I guess you never know with John, but does that lead you to think that maybe they should plan on having a veteran quarterback in 2025, and
Oh,
maybe getting a hopeful quarterback of the future maybe on day 2?
very possible. If Kirk Cousins is another year removed from his Achilles injury, he's 36, I believe. He'll be 37, which is 4 years younger than Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers won't be coming to the Giants, but
No.
thankfully. But Kirk Cousins would be an option. Class act, widely respected in whatever locker room he's been in. Um, Justin Fields, former first round pick, showed flashes early in the season with the Steelers before Russell Wilson supplanted him. I don't know what the Giants thought of him years ago, but he was the 11th pick by the Bears, and the Bears thought that they had found their franchise quarterback. Turns out they didn't, because in part because of the mishandling of the young quarterback, and we've seen that with Zach Wilson with the Jets, Sam Darnold with the Jets. So yeah, whatever quarterback the Giants pick, it would certainly help to have a bridge quarterback who can help guide him, and along with Brian Daboll. So yeah, a bridge quarterback and a young quarterback to learn from him, kind of like Daniel Jones under Eli Manning. Much was made about how invaluable a resource Eli would be for Daniel. And he was when Daniel started playing 3 weeks into the 2019 season. So, yeah, a bridge quarterback and a quarterback of the future, because you absolutely have to get a quarterback of the future, be it Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milrow,
You,
Carson Beck. Again, these quarterback evaluations from now until the NFL draft are going to change. They always do. Sean Payton, give him credit for seeing in Bo Nix what a lot of NFL people, including the Giants, did not see. Um, but the Giants decided to kick the can down the road. They were not convicted on Nix. They were not convicted on Michael Penix Jr. They were not convicted on J.J. McCarthy, who now is a trade option for the Giants. Um, but so give them credit. They did not force a quarterback pick and ended up with Malik Neighbors. Now, now they should not force a quarterback pick, but it's more important that
there has to be
they
somebody in
are
the building,
convicted on one.
right? But even if Cam Ward is sitting there and Brian Daboll doesn't love Cam Ward or Shador, whichever one it is, then you don't take him. You
Correct.
don't because you have to if you don't love the quarterback, if you don't love the quarterback, it's not going to work. It's just not. If you don't love what you're bringing into the building, you because then you're always sort of fighting uphill but if you love the kid, take the kid. If not, find yourself an option on day 2, that you think you can develop and build the roster
I
because
agree 100%. And
you just never know with these kids, Steve. You never know. I mean, your odds are better in the top 5 than they are in the second round, but you just never know. I mean, Jalen Hurts is working out pretty well for the Eagles.
that's a good point. But I don't believe they will force a quarterback pick high, but I think they will force themselves to pick a young quarterback for Daboll to develop behind a bridge quarterback. And at number 3, they pick Travis Hunter. They need a corner, right?
Nothing wrong with that.
They might need 2 corners.
Mhm.
Maybe they can convince Dion to leave Colorado and play corner for them.
Oh,
Whether
who
he brings
knows?
Shador with him or not.
I don't know
But
if Dion moves well enough anymore, Steve. I don't know. I don't
well,
know.
he might move enough to start in the Giants secondary,
That's
which
that's
which
that's
which leads us to Deontay Banks and Evan Neal, and
Mhm.
the fact that those first 2 Joe Shane drafts have not resulted in the impact players that the Giants so desperately need. And
Right.
that's why Shane's 3rd draft saved him from the Evan Neal and the Deontay Banks regression, which was shocking to me. I sat down with Deontay Banks before the season started, and he was talking about being the number 1 cornerback in the NFL. I mean, the kid was not lacking in confidence. Maybe he is now. Maybe this has been a rude awakening for him, and it would be he needs to grow up and become a professional. But he was I think the 24th pick in the draft. They could have had Joey Porter Jr., um, who I mocked to them in my final mock draft. But yeah, look. They still need a corner. They still need an interior defensive lineman. Um, they might need another offensive lineman. Um, a lot of holes, but the biggest hole is a young franchise quarterback. You're not going to win in the NFL without a winning NFL quarterback, bridge quarterback, or quarterback of the future, or both.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where it goes. I think they have to have both in some fashion. I just wanted to ask you before we go,
before we
You
go,
mentioned
I got all day. Why you
oh,
rushing
then
me off?
we'll hang out for a while.
Good.
We'll just keep going.
I
JJ
got no
McCarthy. All right, you
I
got
have
no place to go?
I have no life.
Ah, ah. Well, neither do I. So
Unlike you.
oh, yeah, sure, sure. That's but yeah, so we'll just sit here for a while and talk. But JJ McCarthy, you mentioned McCarthy. The I like McCarthy. I thought, he was the youngest of all of those quarterback options in the draft a year ago. I do a mailbag every week. I've gotten a lot of questions about McCarthy, and if it was me as the GM and the Vikings are willing to put McCarthy on the market, if it was me, I might be interested in making that move. Maybe if I can get McCarthy for a 2026 first round pick and some other assets. I don't want to give up the 2025 pick. But I really wonder, the Giants passed on McCarthy last year, and they passed on McCarthy for a reason. I don't know exactly what that reason was, but there was something that concerned them about JJ McCarthy. So, as much as I might do it, I have my doubts that the Giants would go and give up, all of those assets to get McCarthy. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, I wouldn't give up a 2026 first round pick, which could be a premium pick, given the Giants' uh, predicament at the moment and given their schedule next season or this coming season. But I think I like JJ McCarthy. Again, we don't know how high he was rated on the Giants board. They did pass on him, but look, the Vikings didn't pass on him. The Vikings saw what Jim Harbaugh saw, a winner,
Mhm.
and he fits the mold of a quarterback of the future. And there are some people who say that McCarthy would be the at the top of the quarterback class this year. And if that's true, then yes, I would trade for JJ McCarthy, but I would not give up a 2026 number one pick. I just wouldn't. Um, I think that might be construed as a panic move, and I don't think it would make sense because of how high that pick could be. But there are other ways to skin the cat, and that's up to Joe Shane. But yeah, JJ McCarthy would definitely appeal to me uh, if
Ye
Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are not options. I think JJ McCarthy, intangible wise, has what Brian Daboll would be interested in.
Yeah, I just like I said, the only thing that gives me pause is that if they wouldn't use the number 6 pick on him, I wonder if they would make that move, but I
Well,
absolutely would like that move, especially like you said, if they can do it without giving up a 1 in some fashion, then I think it's kind of a no-brainer.
yeah, well, they obviously had Malik Neighbors rated higher than they had JJ McCarthy rated. And Malik Neighbors was the best of that rookie crop. Marvin Harrison Jr. killed my fantasy team, and and Dunze,
Sorry.
yeah, Dunze is going to be good, but he did not make the impact that Malik did. 109 catches uh, with the Giants. So
Yep.
uh, you can't criticize the neighbors pick, but now you can't kick the can down the road. You gotta you gotta find a quarterback you're convicted on, and hopefully the
Mhm.
Giants do for their sake,
Right.
because it'll be Black Monday next year if they don't find a quarterback and they don't develop them and they don't win
Win some games.
a lot more games than they did this year.
Yeah.
You know that 101st anniversary season is going to mean a lot to John Mara.
At this point, they all do, and at some point, John's patience is going to run out. But let me ask you something about Malik Neighbors. All right. Um, when before the Giants drafted Malik Neighbors, assistant GM Brandon Brown, I think it was, said, there's a lot there to the personality. There's a lot there that we're going to have to get comfortable with. There's a lot we're going to have to, we're going to have to to understand. And there were times during the season when I kind of wondered about Malik just because of certain things that he would say. But in the end, I look at Malik Neighbors and I look at not only the production, but I look at what Malik Neighbors did this year just in terms of this kid was hurt all the time. This kid, I would see this kid in the locker room just dragging himself around the locker room on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then he would go out there on a Sunday and make 7, 8, 9, 10 catches. To me, you talk about building a culture, and we talked about the lack of veteran leadership and all of that, but you talk about building a culture and setting a standard. For me, Malik Neighbors, in a way, sort of made himself the standard just because of, just in a way like Brian Burns, who played through a lot of injuries this year and said, "This is my job. This is what we do. This is what you're supposed to do." And I just look at Malik Neighbors that way because he dragged himself out there and was insanely productive, even though we all knew he wasn't 100%, physically. And that I think that really surprised me.
Yeah, he's a a very prideful kid. Um, Again, he had a few rough edges, uh, adapting to losing, adapting to the New York market, which can ruin young players, can ruin veteran players as well. But he grew up. He seemed to mature a little bit towards as the year progressed, and he told us right from day one, from the draft, that he had that dog mentality, the same mentality you bring to your podcast. I might add, and he never veered from that dog mentality. He's a guy who I compared him mentality wise on the field to Lawrence Taylor. If 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 you're keeping score, if there's a game to play, Lawrence Taylor would do whatever it took to win the game, whether he was hungover or not. Um, and oftentimes he was.
He
But
was.
yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, Parcells loved that about Taylor. There was that game in the Superdome in the late '80s when he had a separated shoulder, and he willed the Giants to victory. And Malik Neighbors is that kind of guy who can will a team to victory as long as he has a quarterback who can deliver him the ball. And there's only
Mhm.
so much you can do as a wide receiver. I did a Q&A after the draft with a Dunze, and he's as good as it gets character-wise, charismatic, just just the best, just everything you want in a locker room presence. He reminded me of Saquon Barkley. Neighbors again did not have that same poise and composure, let's say, but his talent is undeniable, and those rough edges have been smoothed out, and he welcomed being a spokesman of sorts for a team that was going down the drain weekly. And Brian Daboll loved that fire, loved that competitiveness. He would take 53 Malik Neighbors at this point, and who could blame him? But yeah, it's scary to think how great he could be with a quarterback who can get deliver him the ball the way Joe Burrow can get that ball to Jamar Chase, because that's the comparison: Malik Neighbors and Jamar Chase, the those LSU studs. Um, so we'll see. Get him.
Absolutely.
The Giants are not going to find a Joe Burrow, but they could find someone that could enhance what Malik Neighbors has brought to the table.
Absolutely. And Steve, I do speaking of dogs and dog mentality, my dogs are about to start barking like crazy here because there's a repairman who's about to knock on the door in a couple of minutes.
I'm getting
So
I'm getting booted out for your repairman. Come
so
on,
you're
Ed.
you're getting booted. Unfortunately, I'll have you back. I'll have you back. We'll do it again, but But so I have to go deal with that. I have to get back to my
Ask
life.
your repairman what he thinks about Shane and Daboll.
I will. We'll do a podcast with him. All right.
Maybe he can repair the Giants.
All right, Steve. Thank you so much. And like I said, we'll have you back. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.